Thank you for showing up. And maybe you saw the title of the talk, The Sure Heart's Release, Tranquility and Insight, Working Together. And hopefully over the years of your practice, you've bumped into the Buddha's instructions on mindfulness of breathing. And of course, we won't master it in one night, but I find it a really useful way of understanding this blending of tranquility and insight and how they work together. So we'll do that in the guided meditation, which we'll do now. And then after a 35-minute sit or so, then I'll talk about these instructions that the Buddha gave, really his most complete, thorough set of meditation instructions. And we can sort of be a little misled by the instruction or the title, mindfulness of breathing, because although the breath is used initially, very quickly the breath is there in the background as a real support, but it's really a mindfulness of the whole natural process of awakening, of shedding, dropping what doesn't need, the mind doesn't need to be holding. So I look forward to unpacking that a little tonight and hearing what you have to say. But let's take some time to settle in, see how we can come to a stable, relaxed, relatively upright sitting posture that works for our body. The eyes can be open or closed. And the first thing the Buddha instructs us to do with this set of instructions is to establish mindfulness to the fore, or to establish mindfulness right here in the forefront, in a sense, as the most relevant, most important thing. So that means we have a moment now just to reflect, each of us, on what it means to be present, to be aware that this experience is being known. To be aware of the present moment means there's a recognition, there's an awareness that the mind is knowing this or feeling this now. So just appreciating that capacity to be awake, to be present in this simple, non-judging way. We're not directing the attention yet, we're just establishing mindfulness to the fore. In a sense, we're remembering this capacity to be present as opposed to being lost in thought. Simply recognizing that this is being known, feels like this. And in this simple presence, noticing that the body, the breath is coming in, and noticing right here in the body that the breath is going out. It's not so easy initially for us to be aware of something without feeling obliged to fix or control or manage. Just see if you can appreciate this natural process of breathing in and breathing out. Doesn't really require any management. And because the breathing process is happening here and now, the breathing process is naturally known in the present moment because it's something that's happening here and now. So instead of looking for the breath, keep it more simple, just establishing mindfulness here and now. And in that space of recognizing the present moment, realize that the breath is coming in, and then realize the physicality of breathing out. And then we'll begin to seclude our attention from the diversity of sound and sight and thought by becoming more and more interested in the ordinary process of breathing in and breathing out. We might call this stage of the practice bringing a more exclusive attention to the physicality of breathing in and breathing out. And for some of you, it might be feeling that touching as the air comes in and goes out of the nostrils, or for others, it might be more obvious as a rising and falling of the abdominal wall. There's really no right or wrong way to be feeling the in and out breath. But now we're realizing our capacity to not be dependent on the diversity of what's happening in the moment, and instead realize that I can be interested in this more exclusive experience of breathing in from the beginning of the in-breath through to the end, and breathing out from the beginning of the out-breath until the end. And to help with this, just noticing if the breath is relatively long or relatively short, relatively gross or relatively refined. We're not imposing any preference for how the breath is. We're just noticing the particular quality of each breath coming in and going out. And we're making this very simple effort to be interested in this natural process of breathing in and breathing out. We don't need to make an effort to focus in a tight way or to change the breath. It's more about keeping the physicality of the breath in mind, and to begin to appreciate the pleasure of seclusion as the mind is freed from attending to everything else. It starts to have an inner pleasure of simplicity. And it's really good to notice this pleasure of seclusion, the mind secluded from the this and the that of our wider experience. one half breath at a time. And you might notice a natural settling because the mind and the breathing process tend to reflect each other. So as the mind and body settle, the breath will naturally become more refined. And it's not something to manage or control, but just to notice. Allowing the breath to become as simple and refined and even sometimes short as it does. See if you can find a subtle joy in the practice. Now I'm going to walk us through most of the 16 steps that are part of this set of instructions, but you can hear them, you can let the instructions land, but each of us, we have to find our own way. So it's always okay to linger with any of the instructions. You don't have to go ahead. But in terms of learning the map, I'll go through most of the instructions during the sit. So the third instruction, the Buddha says, one trains oneself breathing in, experiencing the whole body, breathing out, experiencing the whole body. And we're still aware of breathing in, breathing out, and maybe it's a relatively refined in and out breath. But the breath now goes more into the background or periphery. And we're choosing to be aware of the whole body as we breathe in, choosing, training to be aware of the whole body, to experience the whole body as we breathe out. We're not trying to fix the body. We're not trying to release tension in the body. We're simply meeting or knowing the totality of the body as we breathe in, aware of the totality of the body, bodily sensations as we breathe out. In a way, this is the mind and body harmonizing. It's a kind of healing of mind and body. Training oneself, breathing in, experiencing the whole body, breathing out, experiencing the whole body. Not afraid to feel what we feel as we breathe in, as we breathe out. And then the fourth instruction, one trains oneself, breathing in, calming the body, calming the bodily formations, the bodily activities. One trains oneself, breathing out, calming the body. So the way to do this is just to notice where in the body there's already a little or a lot of calm. And just having this intention, this wholesome desire for the body, the bodily activities to settle. We're not forcing anything. We're just valuing this letting the body be, the mind and the body harmonizing, not in any kind of conflict. And as you begin to notice some calm, notice how that calming begins to spread through the body naturally, unforced. This is an aspect of the pleasure of seclusion, is this calming of the body. The mind is being okay with the body as it is. And this experience of spreading and deepening calm in the body can allow us to recognize a lightness, a buoyancy of the heart. So the fifth instruction, the Buddha says, one trains oneself, breathing in, experiencing joy. Breathing out, experiencing joy. So we're training the mind to keep joy in mind as we breathe in, as we breathe out. Everything else can just be in the background. And remember, joy is quite simple. It's just this buoyant lightness, even a joyful interest, like an inner smile. that sense of everything happening on its own. Breathing in, experiencing joy, even if it's faint. Breathing out, experiencing joy. Just doing the best we can to keep joy in mind. And joy will naturally mature when we keep it in mind to a more resonant ease of the heart, contentedness, happiness of the heart. So the instruction is one trains oneself breathing in, experiencing this happiness of ease. Breathing out, experiencing this happiness of ease. Keeping ease in mind as you breathe in, doing your best to keep that experience of ease in mind as you breathe out, even if it's faint, letting it be the object that the mind is interested in. As if the heart's hardness is melting in a pleasant way. Choosing to keep ease in mind during each inhalation, during each exhalation. Breathing in, tuning into the ease that's here and now, while breathing out, tuning in to the ease that's here and now. This relaxation of the heart, this pleasant contentment of the heart. And this ease bestows a kind of dispassion. So the next step, the Buddha says, one trains oneself breathing in, experiencing the mental activity, breathing out, experiencing any mental activity, feelings, thoughts, emotions, but with dispassion because of the contentment and ease. Now we're aware of mental activity as we breathe in and breathe out, but with dispassion. It's just thoughts, just mental activity, feelings being known, perceptions, thoughts. Not having a problem with any mental activity. And then naturally this leads to training oneself, breathing in, calming the mental activity, breathing out, calming or quieting the mental activity. But this quieting of mental activity happens naturally. And the cause for the quieting is relating to the mental activity with dispassion, just thoughts being known, feelings being known, perceptions being known, just mental activity being known. And the mind naturally quiets, the mental activity quiets. And now we're specifically noticing the quieting of the mental activity as we breathe in, as we breathe out. Almost as if we appreciate the space between thoughts. Simply noticing the relative quiet of the mind as you breathe in, and noticing the relative quiet of mental activity as you breathe out. And now with the third set of instructions, the Buddha asks us to train while breathing in, to notice not the activity of the mind, but the space of the mind, the space of the knowing mind, the space of the present moment, not the activity of the body and mind, but the space itself. So while breathing in, experiencing the space of the mind, the space of the heart, while breathing out, experiencing the space of the mind and heart, open, silent, still, beautiful, the space of the knowing mind. And then appreciating, gladdening the space of the mind as you breathe in, appreciating and gladdening the mind as you breathe out, appreciating the beauty of the stillness, of this openness, of the silence. Appreciating the goodness or the wholesomeness, very refined pleasure. And we bring our whole attention, we concentrate on the goodness, the pleasure of this open or empty space of the present moment, the silent, still, open space of the present moment. So breathing in, keeping this in mind, breathing out, keeping this in mind. Everything else can fall far into the background. All the way to the point of releasing, liberating the mind of any selfing, any need for ownership of this beauty, of this pleasure of stillness. Breathing in, releasing the heart, the mind. Breathing out, releasing the heart and mind. And there's one more set of instructions. The Buddha asks us to notice the changing nature of the breath, of every aspect of what's being known. So breathing in, observing this changing nature of the breath, of thought, of sound. Breathing out, observing the changing nature. The breath is changing, moving, thoughts, ideas, conceptions also fluid, changing. Nothing really to grasp. So the next instruction, breathing in, observing this dispassion, this sense that there's nothing worthy of grasping. Breathing out, observing that there's really nothing here to grasp, no ground to hold to. Nothing worthy of attachment. Nothing to fix on. So we're learning to trust dispassion, the heart that doesn't grasp, doesn't cling, doesn't hold. The next instruction, the Buddha invites us to recognize these moments of cessation, where the heart gives up all habits of grasping, attaching, holding. Breathing in, observing cessation. Breathing out, observing cessation. And the final instruction, the Buddha asks us to train ourselves breathing in, observing relinquishment. Breathing out, observing relinquishment, just letting go. Letting go of even the underlying tendencies, letting go of insight and understanding, letting go of dependence on anything. Like a free fall. Can this be okay? Allowing everything to be as it is. Take a couple moments. There's no rush. You can stretch the body a little if you need to. So I put a handout in the chat, and don't feel like you have to open it up, but it's just a short version of these instructions from the Buddha and some notes that I put together that you might want to look at some point. And I don't know, don't consider this sort of a usual kind of meditation where you're systematically going through these 16 steps, but it is a way to learn the map and to begin to understand the map. And it might be something like for somebody who uses these 16 instructions from the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha's instructions on mindfulness of breathing. It might be something once a month that a person would go through in a relatively systematic way to contemplate each of the 16 steps. But then most of our sits would be having learned the map to some degree. We probably begin with, that more exclusive attention to the breathing process like we did tonight, but then just see where the practice takes us. So it has a real intuitive element. And if you were to ask yourself, like, oh, how am I practicing? You might be able to place yourself somewhere in the 16 steps. And you'll see as I give us an overview of these 16 instructions, there's a real intuitive shape to how the Buddha organized these 16 instructions into 4 sets of 4 instructions. And one of the most important points that I'd like to bring out tonight, and by the way, if anybody's interested in attending this fall retreat that I'll be leading for the San Diego community, we'll spend our time, at least the instructions, with the 4-day retreat, we'll really have time to learn and see where these instructions can take us. So one of the main points in this, there's even a kind of provocative story. Who knows whether these stories are really true, but there is a story that's handed down through the tradition that during the time of the Buddha, even today, there is this instruction to bring to mind the different parts of the body as a means to help us develop some dispassion toward the body, because basically it's skin and bones and, the juicy stuff, the flesh, and skin, flesh, bones, probably a few other things, hair, and on like that. And it's and so the Buddha gave this instruction, evidently, this is how the story goes, to some of the monks at the time. And then he wandered off, but some of the monks, in practicing by themselves, really got out of balance and depressed, and some even committed suicide. So it's said that the Buddha, having seen like that way of practicing, wasn't obviously very useful for some of the practitioners. So he started to emphasize mindfulness of breathing because there is this element of pleasure all the way through. The heart still has to find its way to the place where it's willing to let go of attachment. It doesn't mean suicide, so please don't misunderstand the instructions. But because suicide is still attachment, like we're identified with the pain of being a human being and we want out. that's grasping. That's not attachment. So this place of balance where the heart lets go of any dependency. And, the Buddha might have had deep insight, but he was still, through his years of being a teacher, learning how to articulate what had happened in his own practice in a way that would be helpful for others, right? So then what, over the years, he taught for about 40 years before he passed away. Mindfulness of breathing became the predominant way. I mean, there are other instructions that the Buddha gave, but this is one he practiced himself all through his years, even after his awakening, which is telling. And he would say about it, experiencing the happiness of seclusion here and now. It's like, why wouldn't we do it? Why wouldn't we take a nice bath and put some, I put cedar oil in my bath because I like the smell. So there's a very wholesome pleasure. And it starts with this, in the first 4 instructions, is this realization. It's a real insight that this mind, everybody's mind, all our hearts and mind, it's capable of dropping our addiction to the diversity of our experience. Like if there's a sound in the next room, I feel when my mind isn't in a sort of meditative space, I feel obliged to go to pay attention to that sound and to have an opinion about it, like try to figure out what it is and then decide whether I like that sound or not. And then there's this thing moving over there in that corner of the room, and then a thought, a memory. And in this way, we are afflicted and in a very real way. I mean, it might sound a little over the top to say it this way, but we're tormented by the diversity of experience and our habit. It's really this habit that torments us to, in experiencing some experience, to have an opinion about it, to be liking it or not liking it, to be reacting to it in some way. So when we establish mindfulness to the fore, right, we begin, and then in that being aware of the present moment, bringing the attention to the natural process of breathing in and breathing out, to whatever degree the mind, the heart is attending to that natural process of breathing in and breathing out, it's realizing I don't have to attend to all the other phenomena that are coming and going in the field of my experience. And that's a real vacation from the diversity of experience. Now, it isn't a long-term strategy. It's a meditative technique to use some aspect, often a neutral aspect of our experience, and to gather one's attentiveness around something ordinary like the process of breathing in. And as I mentioned, it might be as simple as just feeling that touching at the tip of the nose, or feeling the rising and falling, that movement of the abdominal wall, or wherever, however it's for you relatively easy to sense the breathing in and the breathing out, right? Because it isn't about the tip of the nose and it isn't about the rising and falling of the abdomen. It's about the gathering of attention around something happening in the present moment, and therefore getting a vacation from going here, that flitting about, attending to this and to that. And so when we stabilize that, and initially it might take a lot of work, just the first few instructions, establishing mindfulness to the fore. So that means just remembering what it means to recognize this is being known. It's a little different than what we would normally think of as focusing our attention on something. Mindfulness is that recognition that breathing in is being known, assuming that that's what we're paying attention to. So we're recognizing in the present moment that breathing in is being known. So there's a reflective knowing. We're knowing that the breathing in is being known. I know that can sound a little strange, but it's really an important point for each of us to clarify in our own experience. So we really get the difference between the idea of like focusing on something, but then it could miss this reflective knowing, like the mind is knowing that this is being known. Just like you're hearing my voice, presumably, but we can have that reflective knowing where I know that I'm hearing Mark's voice. There's a knowing that the hearing is being known. And it's a subtle distinction. So then when we're aware, when we're knowing that breathing in is being known, being felt, and then knowing that breathing out is being known, being felt, and in a sense, learning how to be fully present, keeping this natural process of breathing in and out in mind, and dropping the attention to everything else, and feeling the pleasure of that simplicity, of just knowing this exclusive aspect of our present moment experience. And it's really important to conjoin, to bring together the pleasure of seclusion with the breath, with the, in this case, the primary object, which is the breathing in and breathing out. Because the pleasure then, it's sort of that next move that the Buddha asks us to do is to open, to include the totality of the whole body. So now the breathing in and breathing out, it's a little bit like the metronome you see on pianos, right? It's just there in the background. And when we lose the breath, you can bet the mind is distracted. But now the Buddha is asking us to train ourselves. Why, while you're aware of the breath coming in, can you be aware of the whole body? And it's important that we don't do what we often do when we're aware of the body. It's almost like we've got this instinct to go where there's pain and see if I can unpack it. But it's not that kind of energy work, you know, we're using our attention to beg the body to let go of tension or something like that. It's really just a more relaxed inclusivity of the whole body. Breathing in, experiencing the whole body. And we're learning something with this third step. We're learning something about the nature of awareness. Awareness by its nature is inclusive. It doesn't put things into categories. That's our conceptualizing process. You know, when we think breath, you know, feeling the feet, hearing a sound. But actually, and you can just check right now, like awareness of the present moment. You might have a meditation habit of thinking, oh, Mark just mentioned about being aware of the present moment, and you bring your attention, you focus on one thing because you want to be a good Buddhist. But actually, when we really understand what it is to be aware of the present moment, we notice there's naturally an inclusive nature to the present moment. So this third instruction, where the Buddha asks us to train ourselves while breathing in, to experience the whole body, and to train ourselves as we're breathing out to be aware of the whole body. And just to really begin to understand that inclusive nature. And as I mentioned in the instructions, you'll begin that initial pleasure of simplicity and seclusion now kind of has more resonance as a kind of harmonizing of the mind and body. So when that fourth instruction comes around, where we're calming the body as we breathe in, calming the body as we breathe out, it's not so much that our aches and pains are going away. I mean, they might, but they might not. But what is definitely changing here is the mind is in a harmonious relationship with the experience of the body. The mind is not in conflict. So it's almost like as we're breathing in, aware of the whole body, we're being aware of the whole body with kindness, not in a conflictual way, judgmental way, not even trying to fix the body. That a willingness to be inclusive, to let the body be the body, whatever that's like, as we're breathing in or breathing out. That's healing the body and mind's relationship. And it feels good. And that feeling good is experienced as a bodily calm that we can begin to attend to with this fourth instruction. We're keeping that sense of calm in the body and mind as we breathe in and as we breathe out. And you might notice that it begins to spread. And you just start wherever it seems most clear that there is a little calm, a little sense of calm and the bodily activity. And just appreciate that as you breathe in, appreciate the calming sense in the body, appreciate it as you breathe out, body and mind harmonizing more and more until there's a real sense of integration and the wholeness of the mind and body, the non-conflict. And as the mind is aware of that, you might sense that subtle joy. Joy is sort of an interesting thing to unpack as a subjective experience. So not some theoretical idea of what joy should be or what joy is. But when we use the word joy to describe an experience of our heart and mind, what are we actually talking about? What's our subjective experience of joy? So I've done this and I encourage you to do this. And for me, when I put it to words, there is this activity of body and mind. That's basically what's always happening. Stuff is moving. And some of the stuff that's moving we call body, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touches. All of that is in motion. There's nothing static in seeing. There's nothing static in hearing. There's nothing static in smelling and tasting and touching. Even though superficially, like if I have a real ache in my shoulder, superficially it might feel static. But when I really bring a relaxed and full attention to that seemingly solid ache, it's alive with change. It's moving, it's getting worse or getting better or morphing this way or that way. Everything is moving. So back to what is the subjective experience of joy? Well, everything is moving, thoughts are moving, bodily activity moving. But when there's movement here in the present moment with less and less friction or resistance, then there's that lightness of heart, that buoyancy. It's really the affect of everything moving, everything happening on its own, but the mind not bothering to resist, not bothering to need to dominate or control or demand or fix. So it really arises out of a more natural trusting of the present moment. And why would this trusting of the present moment be arising now? Because there was this really nice harmonizing of the body and mind. They were getting along. And the system was beginning to feel like, oh, maybe it's okay to be a human being because the mind and body feel pretty good together right now. And so the mind begins to drop its normal stance of, fight or flight, or being in control. It begins to relax. And as it relaxes, we experience things just happening on their own. Like the present moment is doing what it does. It it's moving, but there's less friction. And that's what I call joy. Now, the subjective experience is just this, initially, it might be very subtle. And it's really important not to believe the thought, there's no joy here. I'm screwed. I'm on the fifth instruction and there's no joy. So don't worry about that. Just notice, well, that's just a thought. Maybe go back to, if you were able to feel some calm, ground again in that breathing in and just aware of that relatively harmonized feeling of the body and mind, the calm in the body as you breathe in and out. And just that trust, that sense of inner safety, and the lightness, like the heart, the mind not being in a defensive stance. There's some lightness to the not being in a defensive stance. Can we feel that? And it's hard in practice. So much of what we're noticing is what's not there, right? So like in the fourth instruction of noticing the calming of the body, what we're really noticing is the absence of the mind being in conflict with the body. So we call it calm, but we could call it the absence of the mind being, domineering with the body, controlling, judgmental, not liking, trying to fix. But instead we call calm. Same with joy. Joy is the absence. It's a more generalized and profound trusting. Right? So trusting that movement, whatever the movement of the body and the mind, and feel the lightness, the buoyancy. And I like, for some of you, more poetic expression might be useful, like an inner smile, because there's something when the mind isn't in its normal groove of feeling like life is out to get me, so I've got to really be in this tight, controlling mode or disconnected. But when we really begin to trust the present moment and allow things to just unfold and feel that lightness, there's just that natural generosity of the heart. And that can also connect like just a generous smile out in all directions. And that can help one attune to the experience of lightness and joy. In any case, the key is just to learn to be willing to persist. And it's not a tightness, it's like an interest in joy as I'm breathing in, being interested in joy as I'm breathing out. Can I be interested in joy as I'm breathing in? Where am I looking for joy? Here and now. But just right here and now. You don't have to use your physical heart, but it's totally fine to begin, that sense, that curiosity here. But wherever there's some lightness, wherever there feels like there's unrestricted movement, enough of a trust, enough of a safety that the heart isn't imposing, isn't locking down, right? And so then there's movement without friction. Lightness is being known. Breathing out, joy is being known. And the more the heart connects, remembers, perceives, attunes to joy, breathing in, breathing out, it will naturally mature, that lightness, that good feeling. Then the heart has a sense of a more deep trust. And there's almost like a relaxation, a melting, like different layers of defensiveness, existential defensiveness begin to release and settle. And you could call it contentedness. I like the word ease because it has such a energetic or visceral sense, the word ease. And remember, all the way through with these instructions, it's always okay if it's helpful to add a little phrase. So you could say, when you're on this is the 6th step, one trains oneself, breathing in, experiencing ease, breathing out, experiencing ease. But, you don't need to use that many words. You could just, as you sense the metronome, is it metronome? Forget what the word is now. But anyway, as you sense the in and out breath there in the periphery, you could just use the word ease as the breath is going out, and the word ease. Don't feel like you have to use these meditation words, but at times it might be a useful support to bring in. And you'll find you could use the word calm when you're on step 4 and joy when you're on step 5, just as a reminder to the heart what you're keeping in mind as you're breathing in and what you're keeping in mind as you're breathing out. So we go from joy to a more resonant happiness we call ease. And because if we are successful in tuning into some of the natural ease that's available, it's the ease of just letting things be, then the Buddha suggests that we train ourselves to be aware of mental activity. Because of the presence of ease, the heart feels pretty safe, and it feels pretty content. So it's not so dependent on thoughts to make the moment interesting or to get somewhere or to get rid of something. So it can have a much more dispassionate relationship to thinking and to the mind's perceptions, what it's seeing and perceiving, what it's thinking, what it's feeling. That mental activity always continues generally. It might get very refined and very subtle, but that part of the mind, that's what it does. It perceives, it thinks, it feels. But now as we're breathing in aware of mental activity and breathing out aware of mental activity, so this is the 7th step, then it's really aware of mental activity with a lot of natural dispassion, meaning the mind isn't dependent on its thoughts. Most of the day, we have a pretty much a dependent relationship with the thinking process and what we're perceiving. We're kind of trying to get something from our mental activity, figure out, like, rebrand myself. I'm like, who am I? Oh, I'm this. No, that doesn't feel. There's always some tension in terms of how the mind is relating to the meaning that our thoughts are constructing, as if there's a somebody that's dependent on these conceptions, on the meaning that the thoughts are putting or sort of shaping. But because the heart is feeling so much ease, now the mind is willing to let mental activity just do its thing. It's just stuff, like someone left a radio on. It's just mental activity being known. So we're not trying to suppress it. We're not trying to stop it. We're just aware of mental activity in this dispassionate way. And that, it turns out, is what quiets the mind down. Not by trying to quiet the mind down, but by relating to mental activity with dispassion, neither for nor against it, neither in need of it, nor in need of getting rid of mental activity. And then the mind, the thinking mind, the perceiving mind, the feeling mind, all of that just becomes quieter and quieter. And that's the 8th step, is we're noticing the quieting. So it's almost like I mentioned in the guided sit, don't tune in to the next thought or the next perception, but tune into almost like you're noticing the space between the thoughts, or the quietness, the refinement of the thoughts. the unabrasiveness of the thoughts, like little whispers. I don't know if you've noticed this, but sometimes in meditation, there will be mental activity, but that part of the mind isn't even bothering to make sense. It's like little fragments of mental images and thoughts, but it's almost nonsensical. And it's like there's nobody demanding that anything explain anything or anything make sense about anything. But that part of the mind that conceives still does its thing, but in a very unimportant and refined way, not in a way that causes any problems. And you can see how this naturally sets up the ninth instruction, right? Because now one trains oneself while breathing in to experience the mind, the space of the mind, the knowing mind, not the activity of the mind. And I sometimes like, instead of using the word mind, or you could use the word heart, you might also want to use the space of the present moment, because this right now is a moment of mind. So, you might be looking at me or looking at your computer or hearing the sound of my voice or feeling your aching body or whatever it might be. But all this is being known in the space of the mind. Our experience is always mind. It's being known here in the space of the mind. But now, because the activity of mind is quieted down to some degree, and there's some ease, it's easier for the mind to intuit, to sense the space of the present moment. Not what's happening in the space of the present moment, but the space of here and now, the space of knowing, the open, silent, empty space. Because we're not attending to the activity of the present moment, we're training the mind to attend to the space of the present moment. Does that make sense? All of these take some training, right? And it's the whole path. This is what's so great about it. And you can, a lot of you have done different kinds of meditation, and you'll recognize this place. There's any number of ways to get to this place where you're noticing the space of the mind. And it's a really nice meditative space, which is why the 10th instruction, one would train oneself while breathing in to appreciate, to gladden, to respect this open, silent space, empty space of the mind. And while breathing out, to gladden it, to appreciate it, to honor it, to recognize its wholesomeness. It is good to recognize the space. One way to characterize an ordinary human being, like all of us, is that most of the time our mind is obsessed, fixed on the activity of the present moment, and therefore oblivious to the space of the heart, the space of the mind, the space of the present moment. And that really matters, because we're missing, just to be blunt, we're missing half of the truth of the present moment, right? We're totally aware of the gross aspect of the present moment, the activity, and totally unaware of what is subtle but significant. And it's really getting to know what's subtle that completely transforms how the heart relates to the gross. It's not actually, the problem with us human beings isn't the gross experiences that we're aware of. The problem is we're missing half the picture, and it distorts how we relate to the part of the picture we are aware of, the sort of gross level of sensuality. We become desperate and dependent on sensuality because we don't have the whole picture. So this third set of 4 instructions, where breathing in, breathing out, experiencing the space to the mind, appreciating, gladdening, respecting, honoring that space as we breathe in and out, concentrating. That means we're exclusively aware of the beauty, the silence, the stillness, the mind that is empty of self-centered activity as we breathe in and out. And that, when that comes to fruition, that attentiveness to the space, the empty space of the mind, then the mind realizes something. It realizes a mind moment, let's say, that is empty of self-centered grasping, empty of self-centered activity. And that's an important learning and a really deep spiritual healing, to have these moments where the mind recognizes the mind empty of selfing, empty of self-centeredness. Because until then, the mind only knew the mind somewhat affected, somewhat dependent on the view of self, on the sense of a location of a me and mine, an I, me, or mine, right? But because we're really appreciating the space, because the sense of self always is dependent on activity, it's a construction. The mind constructs the sense of a separate, permanent self. So by keeping in mind the open, empty space, then there's no room for that sense of location, that I, me, or mine to form. And that's a powerful awakening. And it really helps build the confidence for the last 4 instructions, which I'll review, and then we'll have, I think, plenty of time for conversation. It'd be great to hear your response and your own reflections from your sit tonight or your years of practice. Because once we've had, you remember that last instruction in that third set. So we have experiencing the mind, gladdening the mind or appreciating the mind, concentrating the mind, and then liberating or releasing the mind, right? The mind is released the grip of wrong view or of a fixed view of self. It's released. It's no longer in need of that. And then the Buddha, for the last set of 4 instructions, then, is really a maturing of that insight of the mind empty of grasping, the mind free of self-centeredness. And it's kind of addressing or answering the question, what, when I keep it in mind, gravitates or aims the mind towards letting go, toward that insight that we had at step 12. So now with 13, the answer is, well, breathing in, one trains oneself while breathing in to keep the changing nature, the impermanent nature, the insubstantial nature of experience in mind, and the same as we breathe out. Well, the breath has been there in the periphery all along. So now we can actually use the breath or any phenomena, but because we've been training with the breath, it would be an obvious choice, but it could be any phenomena, anything that's being known in the moment. We're just choosing to notice its changing, ephemeral, insubstantial, unreliable nature, because anything of the body and mind has that changing nature. And now we're choosing to keep it in mind as we breathe in and keep it in mind as we breathe out. So again, just let's presume we're just attending to the refined breath coming in and out and noticing, when something is changing, it's not really anything, right? Because before it becomes something, it's already where it is next, and then where it is next. And there's something profoundly mysterious about that, because we live with the idea that things are something that I can know and connect with and ground with. But that's not actually the nature of experience. And now, because of the development of our practice, there's a more profound curiosity, because the mind has some sense of putting everything down. So now it's willing to let impermanence in, and it matures into this dispassion. So 13 is keeping impermanence in mind as we breathe in and out. 14, we train ourselves while breathing in to sense the dispassion, a more profound and generalized. There's a really powerful image from the suttas you might have heard, and it involves a very skilled butcher who's able to very skillfully strip all the meat off of the bones. All that's left on the bones is maybe a little smeared blood, and he'd throw the bones on the ground for the dog. And the dog, smelling the blood, thinks meal. And so works really hard on the bones, but doesn't find anything there, right? And eventually realizes, well, I don't know, depends on the intelligence of the dog, I suppose, there's nothing here for me. The story is with this simile, the dog chews so hard trying to get some nutriment from the bones that he ends up cutting his own gums and thinking that there is something bloody there, right? It's sort of a simile that for us of like how we whip up things, and it almost seems like, how it was, maybe you're still this way, but when we were younger, some of us partied in the way that young people party, right? And we just presumed it was fun to do whatever that was, to party, and then at some point, some of us mature, I guess you'd say, and realize, you know what, being in a room with a lot of people, you can't really have a good conversation, and being intoxicated, and maybe there's smoke, and it's not really fun. There's nothing here for me. There's nothing worthy of grasping. And this 14th step is this generalized realization that sense experience isn't worthy of grasping. Doesn't mean that it's not pleasant in that ordinary sense, or unpleasant, or whatever it might be. It just means that the very nature of a thought, a sound, a sensation, it's just not worthy of taking personally and trying to extract some nutriment for me. So you might see a beautiful sunset, but when this 14th training is strong, where we're breathing in, aware of this way of relating with dispassion. We're relating to sensuality, to all sense experience with dispassion as we breathe in and breathe out. We don't get attached to the sunset. We might be served a wonderful meal, really tasty, but there's such a clear sense that it's a nice experience and then it will end. That there's nobody trying to get something permanent from the tasty meal. And there's nobody afraid of unpleasantness when it comes our way, because we realize that's also pretty ephemeral. I mean, just think about it. I'm 64. I've had some dark moments in my life. And surprisingly, because it doesn't seem that way when we're in the middle of a difficult time, but those dark times have come and gone. So now the next time something difficult arises, there's this cumulative experience. Yeah, it's really bad. It's really unpleasant. And it's probably going to change. It won't always be this way. So this is a little bit, just trying to give you a little bit of a flavor of that dispassion that we're trying to grow by keeping it in mind, right? It's a training. One trains oneself while breathing in. Of course, we can do this all day long, keeping dispassion in mind. And we're really seeing it as a way of relating, an attitude of mind that we're learning to deeply trust. This is not the same as being indifferent. It's not the same as not caring. It's not a depressed, it's a beautiful quality in the mind. You know, the Buddha talks about the joy of renunciation. So we have to reform or start fresh with this experience of dispassion, have a reset, and really see for yourself what it is. And if you don't want to use that word dispassion, that's fine, because sometimes it's a lot of work to reform a word that has a history. So just have a different word, you know, whatever you want to call it. But the joy of non-dependence. And then that deepening, that more profound trust of dispassion leads to the next, so this would be step 15. The word is cessation, gets translated as cessation. So we're seeing how it's, because of course the awakening process, that's what this fourth set of 4 instructions, it's really the awakening process. Everything up to that point, the first 12 steps, were really helping the confidence, the spiritual maturity, so that the heart can really more directly engage the awakening process. And the awakening process is connecting with things just as they are, changing. The natural process then leads to the heart becoming naturally more dispassionate. Dispassion leads to letting go, the moments of any dependence on experience, and even insight, dependence on insight, dependence on existence itself. The dependence ceases. The grasping ceases. Grasping insight, wanting to be wise, wanting to be free. The dependence on that idea ceases. Wanting to be somebody, like to exist, that dependence ceases, right? And this gives the heart a flavor of what can be let go. And then step 16 is that letting go itself. You know, and this, to me, that my understanding is it's a little bit like a implosion or a free fall, but it's an experience. We want to have a lot of humility with these last 4 instructions. You know, we can have a sense of the first 2, like when the mind really has a nice balance and there's some real continuity of present moment awareness, and we remember to be interested in the underlying nature, how ephemeral. We can really see that deeper sense of dukkha, that nothing is really worthy of attaching to, of grasping. That we can, you know, a lot of, you know, experienced practitioners can have a real sense, intuitive spiritual sense of these first 2. And then when we have moments of the cessation and the deeper experience of letting go, these are pretty life-transforming moments. But even understanding intellectually is very important. It can be supportive of confidence, because at times the practice is really challenging, and to really support our persistence. But remember, before I open it up for a conversation, remember, we're guided all the way through this whole spiritual adventure by pleasure. But it's a different kind of pleasure than nice experience, comfortable experience. The initial pleasure is the pleasure of seclusion and simplicity, that I don't have to be responsible for the diversity of my experience. I can just simply know breathing in and breathing out. And that's such a relief not to be responsible to all the other phenomena in the present moment, and to have this more exclusive attention. And then to begin to open up, but now in this sort of non-judging way, like that inclusive awareness of the whole body. It's pleasurable. The harmonizing of the body and the mind is pleasurable. The keeping joy in mind is very affirming and pleasurable. And the opening and keeping ease of heart, that contentment, is pleasurable. And to be aware of mental activity without being pushed around by it is pleasurable. And the quieting of the mind is pleasurable. And recognizing the space and stillness and openness of the present moment is profoundly, subtly, but profoundly pleasant. And the maturing of that stillness and the profound trust and the dropping of all, the duality, and just the way the sense of self fragments, even liking the nice stillness, it fragments, it ruins it, it stains it in a way. So we abandon even the one who's really liking the silence and the stillness, because it's extra, doesn't help anybody, isn't needed. That's pleasurable. And the last set of four, that process of insight, or the deepening of insight, is in a way the most subtle, wonderful pleasure. Because it really heals this deep existential anxiety about what are we going to do with this life of ours? What's the point? There is a point. The point is to let go. Letting go doesn't mean non-existence. It means non-dependence on existence. That's why in early Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism, you'll see in the text, one of the synonyms for nibbana or liberation is deathlessness, the deathless, right? Because it's the release of any dependence on existence, any dependence on sensuality, any dependence on anything. So really nice to share this with you, and I look forward to our conversation now. Looks like we have about 20 minutes, and I don't know if somebody is going to help with the conversation, or should I just manage? And as Diana mentioned, you can put a question into the chat if you don't want your voice recorded. But otherwise, I'm really okay with this size group, just people unmuting themselves. If you don't want your video captured, you can shut your video off, and then you can just speak. And if two people start to talk at one time, one of you can be polite and let the other person go, and then we'll keep you in mind for the next person. And if you know how to raise your digital hand, that always helps keep things organized. Yeah, anybody have any comments or questions about the Buddhist teachings on mindfulness of breathing, or really anything related to practice that seems relevant?
Mark, may I ask you a question which is just a clarification, so I better understand what you were saying? So you talked about knowing, especially in the first two sets of instructions, you talked about knowing a lot. And I'm trying to comprehend that. And so the question I have is, essentially, are you saying it's a knowing which occurs without any labeling? In other words, it's a deep understanding of what is happening, but you're not labeling it. You're kind of aware of it, but there's no thought about it. Would that interpretation be accurate?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. There can be a thought, but any thought related to establishing mindfulness to the fore would be aiming the mind toward that recognition, because it's like a mental capacity, that reflective awareness, what we call sati, the Pali word sati, that it's like remembering this capacity that we all have right now. We have this capacity to recognize that there is consciousness. How do I know there's consciousness? Because consciousness is knowing this right now. So the awareness, or sati, remembers to recognize that there is knowing. So in a way, you could say there's a knowing of what the mind is knowing. And that's what we mean. And it's really worth not rushing that and going back to that place as often as you need to. Like if at any point in your practice you get lost in thought, it may be well worth our time to just establish mindfulness to the fore, as the Buddha says, where we're remembering there is this capacity. And then to choose to use the breath for a few seconds or a little longer, depending on how stirred up the mind got because of the distraction. That, oh yeah, I can remember that breathing in is being known. I can keep remembering that breathing out, the sensations of breathing out, is being known or being felt. Does that get at what you were asking?
Yeah, I'll have to listen to your talk again because you had some very interesting ways of describing which I have not heard before. And that's so the question I asked was really based on my previous understanding to some extent. But yeah, I think it did. But I do need to kind of listen to the talk again to get a better understanding.
Yeah. And it's really good with these sort of understandings of mindfulness is to like hear the words, think about it, so that you're kind of connecting the new words with your existing understanding, and then to just play with it directly, to look at your mind directly and to recognize that capacity, and then to reform the words so the words that you do use really come out of your own subjective experience of awareness.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the good comment. Looks like Becca put something in the chat here. Let me read that. I noticed that as my mind got quieter, fear began to arise. I've experienced this before. How to convince the mind to trust the letting go. Just understanding why it's happening does not help it release. Yeah, I mean, that fear that comes up is a natural process too, right? Because it's a newer experience, and things that are unknown evoke fear. And I'm wondering, if we just keep at it and don't force it, whether that kind of fear naturally diminishes. I'm guessing that it does, at least to some degree. But, intellectually, and, it may not be helpful as you suggest in your comment, Becca, but intellectually, we know we're not doing anything weird or dangerous, right? I mean, what are we doing? We're just being aware of the present moment and noticing basically the whole 16 steps. We're just noticing more and more subtle aspects of what's always been here, right? So how could that be dangerous? But it does seem that way. So I'm not diminishing. I think probably every meditator gets to places where that sort of deeper fear can come up, because we don't really recognize what the mind thinks it's dependent on until we begin to let it go. And then we realize, oh, I was kind of trusting that. I was kind of dependent on that, and as the mind begins to build its trust, like I was talking about dispassion, like nothing is needed. But the key is not to feel like we have to force things. So when fear arises, I just remind myself that what I'm doing as a practitioner, as a meditator, is I'm doing my best to align with a natural process. It's not my business to make insight happen or to let go. My business as a meditator is to align with nature. And just like some aspects of nature take us into these vortexes, these torments of our heart where we're caught up in lust or caught up in hate or caught up in denial and distraction. But there are other natural processes that naturally, they have their own natural feedback mechanism, naturally lead in wholesome directions. And that's what the awakening process is. And that's why teachers make a big deal out of tuning into the pleasure of the process itself, because that is what initiates the natural process, the feedback mechanism. We're following a thread of pleasure that gets more and more profound and refined. So we need to catch it early, that initial pleasure, because it has the flavor of letting go right at the beginning. Like I'm letting go of the diversity of my experience. I mean, as an animal, to choose not to attend to the sounds in the room and not to attend to the sights and not to attend to the other sensations in my body and not to attend to the thoughts that I'm thinking, that's a real letting go already, just to be with the sensations of breathing in and the sensations of breathing out. So even the first step, I'm learning like, hey, I can trust, just like we have to do at night when we fall asleep. I mean, here we are, we're an animal, a vulnerable animal. And what do? We're choosing to not be on the lookout for threats for some period of time. So that's what we're doing just in a conscious way when we're sitting, especially in those early steps where we're like, I'm not going to attend to thought. I'm not going to attend to sight. I'm just going to be interested in the breathing in process and then the breathing out process. And so any step we might experience that kind of fear. And the antidote is to really get interested in the natural pleasure through the awakening process, through the practice process, even if you have to kind of go back a little bit, where you find that trust in the present moment. Yeah, it feels good to be connected. And then we can always ask ourselves, like if a lot of fear gets triggered, what can I pay attention? What can I do and pay attention to? There will be a natural sense of safety, a natural ability to gather the attention in the present moment. Maybe you have to get up and make a cup of tea, but you can do that with a fullness of presence. Or maybe you need to take a walk with a friend, but do it with a fullness of presence. So sometimes we have to back out of the more subtle areas of practice into more gross, where we do feel safe being radically present when we're walking with a friend and making jokes together. And so do that and build a confidence that being present is safe. Yeah, thanks for the good question, comment. Looks like Robin has something here. The space of the present moment, the space between our inhalations and exhalations of breath, the space when we pause before we speak, can be so challenging for some. Our mind loves to fill in the space. How freeing to just let go and honor the space. Yeah, and I really loved these examples because it just broadens how we can do this practice all day long. Just noticing space, the little pauses. And it's almost like, when people talk about deeper insights into impermanence, it's really this birth and death all the time. And this sentence ceases. And then there's the birth of the next thought or the next sentence. And there's so many of these little and bigger births and deaths. Start where it's easy with you, like you have an interaction with your cat, and then you just let the whole moment implode. And then there's another, the cat nuzzles up against, then you have a moment of interaction, or with your partner or with yourself. But just really get interested in the cessations. So that way life starts to feel so much more fresh, because it's like a new birth. But that freshness depends on a more complete recognition of that letting go, of that cessation, that ending. Or as Robin was saying, that empty space. Yeah, and then Alexa asks about to touch on indifference, as you mentioned. Yeah, that's I think an important, like in communities like the Insight community in San Diego, in your friendships, it's always good to, with our Dharma friends, to be on the lookout for complacency, like no longer that curious, like we are when we're on fire with the Dharma. But, then we can also be quite attached to making progress. So there's shadows to that too. But the other thing we always want to be attentive to is this sense of indifference. Because when we get a stronger intellectual understanding of the practice, it's very easy for a kind of nihilism and indifference to creep in. Well, what's the point? It's all empty. But that only comes with a self-view. That sense of indifference always involves a sense of a self who no longer cares, because life isn't really able to deliver anything to me. But what really liberates the heart isn't that sense experience can't make me happy. What liberates the heart is the realization there's nobody dependent on sense experience making them happy. So indifference is a wrong turn in the practice, but it comes up quite regularly for us. And we just need to see it and feel it as a kind of aversion. And out of compassion for ourselves, we care. Oh, indifference hurts. I mean, it's really that simple. It's not helpful being indifferent, being disconnected, thinking it's not worth it. I don't know if most of you probably know Pema Chodron, but she has a great line. I really love this line. She, when talking about refuge, refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. I mean, it's really refuge in this path of awakening. And she succinctly sums it up as refuge means not holding back. Really the opposite of indifference. We're all into being human, all into being embodied, emotional beings with likes and dislikes. We're all in, because we don't have to be afraid of embodiment. We don't have to be afraid of the messy world. We don't have to be afraid of our imperfect personalities. That fear is a misunderstanding that comes from a wrong view of what's happening. Indifference arises because of wrong view, not because of right view. We have time for one more comment. If anybody has reflections to share, another question.
Mark, yeah. I just want to say, first of all, thanks for the talk. I thought it was terrific. And I loved hearing just about the pleasure aspect in the sitting in the quiet, in part because I do experience that. And maybe sometimes feel a little guilty that I'm in this space that's just really pleasant and can sit there for a while. So I love hearing that that's actually part of the path to move us forward.
Yeah, and we really have to keep saying that because this is another one of the shadows, maybe a little bit more in early Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, our tradition, insight meditation, this kind of grimness. And it's, again, it's just misplaced. I mean, it's understandable because it's not easy being human beings, but the path is a path of real pleasure. It's just not in the direction of sense pleasure. It's the pleasure. I mean, it's really the whole pleasure of renunciation, of letting go, of giving up. But it's real. And it's definitely to be enjoyed because that the thing about spiritual pleasure is it's onward leading. I mean, yeah, we can get attached. We will get attached. But if we really like the pleasure, getting attached to it ruins it. So as long as we really care about the inner pleasure of seclusion and letting go, it's onward leading. It's an important part of that feedback mechanism. So I appreciate the testimonial, Mark. And really nice to be with everyone. Hope to see some of you in November during the retreat, if it makes sense in your schedule. Thanks for the invitation.